All right, Zig coming in on the top. Today on the show, we have legendary bass player and writer Eddie Shaw of the Monks. The Monks were a group of 5 American GIs stationed in West Germany in 1964. The group started as a traditional rock and roll group playing standards and hour-long bar gigs, but due to boredom, experimentation, and by chance, they developed a sound that was uniquely their own that no one else had, or would have. They had the music of the future at that time. Some now might describe it as punk. The Monks would take hypnotic rhythms, they would minimalize melody, and with the shrill and confrontational vocals of their singer Gary and David Day's electronic banjo, which supplied a completely unique rhythm section that no other band had, and with feedback, they made an experimental avant-garde sound that no one of that time has ever heard of. And we probably wouldn't have heard of it if it wasn't for record crate diggers and collectors diving into the history and finding this proto-punk experimental avant-garde record of the Monks and sharing it with the world, people like Henry Rollins and Jello Biafra. And one thing else that added to their legend is they all dressed up like monks. They would wear black robes and they had the haircut. So not only was their music confronting, aggressive, and strange and experimental, but now they're putting on this whole character that people at that time didn't know how to handle. It's the most punk rock thing. They were going as the anti-Beatles, so they said. So the record got distributed in Germany, and then they eventually got to a point where they weren't getting too far, and people weren't latching on to the music of the future. They had a tour that was going to go through South Asia and end up in Vietnam during the time of the Vietnam War. And right before they were about to embark on that, the drummer bailed, and the whole band fell apart, and everyone moved back to America. Years later, in the 90s, record crate diggers found this record of Black Monk Time and brought it back out, and then it finally got released in America. And they had an awesome tour, and they got to get the recognition they deserved. There's a really cool documentary called Transatlantic Feedback, which goes through their whole tale through Germany and winds up showing them touring America, getting the recognition they deserve. So, my conversation with Eddie happened yesterday morning, and it was right off the heels of my band. I play in a band called Sea Level Literacy Dash. We opened up for the Bumping Uglies at the West Side Bowl in Youngstown, Ohio. So that went pretty late. I didn't get home until 3 in the morning and woke up really early to talk with Eddie. It took a little bit to get into the swing of it, but Eddie shared some insane stories, like playing with gas masks on and hanging out with Jimi Hendrix. And then we also dive into writing and what it takes to be a writer and some of the techniques and skills he learned from being in one of the most unique and kind of controversial bands of his time to applying those skills and being an author and moving from that. It was an honor to have this conversation with Eddie, and I'm really excited to share this with you guys. Before that, if you guys can rate, review, subscribe to the podcast and any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like Eddie and sharing their insight with you. Now, without further ado, here is my conversation with the great Eddie Shaw. Well, to jump into it, you started off on drums, right?
I played drums. My first lessons were drum lessons. No, my first lessons were steel guitar lessons, and then I went to drums.
Steel guitar, like lap steel?
Yeah, rock steel guitar.
Wow. That's it. Was that like Carol Kay, the bass player from all the Motown records? That was her thing. That was her first instrument too. Was that kind of a popular first instrument?
Well, there was somebody come to the neighborhood and sold my mom on a guitar lesson, and the next thing I knew, I was learning how to play a guitar, but I didn't care for it that much.
Did it make sense, or was it just like hard, or like it just didn't land?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't hard or anything. It didn't pique my interest too much. The drums did. And the drums were in Marysville, California, at a grammar school.
Jumping from that, when did it go to trumpet?
When I was in the 6th grade, the music teacher came to my house and told my parents that I needed to play trumpet because I was because I was short. I was a little bit small compared to most kids at the time, and he said the trumpet I could match. I could play that without having to worry about a clarinet where your fingers are too small to cover the holes or anything like that. And so I started playing trumpet, and my parents bought a trumpet for $35, and we had a barn next door, next to the house, and a kid come over and showed me the scale, and I learned the scale the first day, and from that I could just play it by ear.
So it just clicked.
It was like I was born for it, I guess.
So, like, during, like, the kind of discovery leading up to the trumpet, was jazz always kind of like your influence?
Yes, well, first of all, in school, I played Dixieland, Louis Armstrong, all that kind of stuff. And in a jazz band, in a Carson High School jazz band. And then from there, but then I heard jazz, and first I was turned on by Dave Brubeck, and after that I just listened to jazz and Miles Davis, and I tried to emulate him. And that was basically the thing that got me going, was jazz.
It's interesting because it's kind of like going from Dixieland to like Miles Davis, and especially like Coltrane. It's kind of like that search for like kind of absolute freedom, like Coltrane kind of got to in his like later albums.
Yeah, it was playing the notes and making them up as you go.
That absolute free expression. And it's interesting because like the Monks kind of, I feel like from the Torquays to the Monks is that kind of practice.
It was a little bit, because we were 5 separate individuals with different tastes in music. And the one thing that we could do together is try to forget our particular styles and work with each other to match the other person's style. And so I gave up jazz, so to speak, but at the same time, some of the principles of improvising and using beats and so forth still applied.
And I imagine kind of jumping from a melodic instrument, from a rhythmic instrument, the drums, to a melodic instrument, then hopping in on bass. Those kind of skill sets were primed for that.
Yeah, they were. Well, the bass. I heard them playing, and they were playing three chord rock and roll. Lewis. I forget his name, but after listening to that, I went and bought a bass and just played the 3 chords, and then I went down and it worked. It matched with their style at the moment.
So, like, when you were on, because those are the music service clubs, right? Where you heard them, and they were going as the rhythm rockers.
Yes, they were. They didn't play any place. Well, they went down to a certain bar in Gelnhausen, and they would put a hat out and play for music, to get in the hat.
Was there just kind of hearing that, or you're like, I want to do that, I can do that, or is it?
It was more like I got this. Because I played in a country western band. I played in a Dave Brubeck type band. I played drums for them.
Yeah.
And in the primary training in boot camp, I played drums, and the same guys, we came across the Atlantic on a boat, and we played for the officers' clubs and stuff like that. And then when I was in Germany, we got separated, and then I played with a different group that was a country and western group, and I played drums for them. And then when they broke up, or there was the officer or the sergeant who was head of that, he left, and then I was bored, and I had to find something to do. And so I went to the service club and saw those guys practicing in a small room, and says, well, I'm going to try that.
It's amazing, like, just the versatility to be able to hop into all those groups, because the drum with a group like a Dave Brubeck group that's doing odd time signatures, you know what I mean? And then to be like, I can hang in a 1-4-5 rock band, you know? There has to be that drive or just bored them to do something.
Yeah, well, your main job, they warn you every day, is to go out and kill commies, you know.
Yeah.
And you say, I don't want to do that. I would want to do something that's fun.
Yeah. Did like, I guess that kind of like militants, like, did you find music kind of like the practice of music and the like structuredness of being in the Army? Like, did you find like a similarity between the two that made it? I mean, there's no easy way to like do any military work, but as far as like the headspace of doing a routine and sticking to a discipline, did you find that music kind of helped?
I never thought about it, but maybe that makes a little bit of sense, in the sense that we could all concentrate on one thing, and in this case with the monks, it was well, setting down a beat, you know, bump 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 bump, or bump 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 bump, you know, and you just do it. And then everybody has to find their own beat in it, you know. And that's how we did it.
Is that the concept of the Uber beat?
Yeah. But yeah, it was bass and drums who lays down the first outline of what it's going to be, and then the banjo fills it in, and the organ fills it in. The banjo comes next and plays. Dave would play the rhythms to it, and then Gary would sing some notes. As the Torquays, we all sang, but in the monks, we decided, for commercial sake, that it was best to have Gary singing. He had a better voice for that.
You guys all had good voices too. Like, even with the stuff when you're trying to soften it up in the later singles, I'm like, these harmonies are tight.
Yeah, well, that comes from playing 8 hours a night, 7 nights a week. For 3 years we worked, I think 3 years we might have had 3 nights off. And it would be 8 hours on many nights, depending where we were. Some places you play from 9 to 3 in the morning. And then on Sundays, you play 2 hours in the afternoon. That gives you 8 hours on stage, and you play different places like Stuttgart, and you just start doing it automatically. You know, you can do it without having to think about it.
Like with the Torquays, there was one club in particular I read. That you guys had to bring gas masks?
No, we didn't have to bring gas masks. We would play in Gelnhausen. After we became the Torquays, we got a job at the Maxim Bar in Gelnhausen, and it was a GI hangout. And the GIs, you'd start in the evening, and they would be all sober and dancing and nice to one another and the girls and stuff like that. But as the evening wore on, when the drinks get drunk, you know, they start getting feisty with one another. And the next thing you know, a fight breaks out. and things happen. And this particular club had it was surrounded by a balcony up above, and chairs would come flying off the balcony, you name it. And the only person who always came prepared was Larry, and he'd bring his gas mask. And he would just stay on the stage and play the gas mask while we all ran for cover. And then he at the end of the night, he'd tell the owner, he says, "We played the whole set. You got to pay us."
Man, but two have to do that at one point. The guy had to be like, "Yeah, you guys didn't play the whole set. Pay you tomorrow." Like,
yeah. Well,
and that happened more than once, though, right? That was kind of a.
It happened, yeah. We would complain about it, and Larry would say, "I told you to bring your gas mask, you stupid people."
That's great. With any like creative endeavor, you look at the absurdness you go through to do it. Like, that's so crazy.
Well, you don't think about it. You're young, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like young people don't really have any awareness of danger, you know.
Yeah. At least until you break the bone or sprain the ankle or can't move the hand the same way or
any of that stuff can happen on any given moment.
That's true. So it kind of so it goes from rhythm rockers to torques, right? I think there's a couple lineup changes in between. And then
Well, I wasn't in the rhythm rockers. It was just Gary and Dave.
Oh, okay.
And they played. They went to a bar and played in the bar with a hat on the floor for money.
And then when you joined, it became the torques.
Well, when we got a group together, finally 5 people playing regular songs, yeah, then it became the torques.
8-hour sets, 6-hour sets. Are you like? Because I do a lot of bar gigs too, and it's like, but I'm looking at like 3 or 4 hours, man, and like you burn through a lot of tunes, and you find yourself doing a lot when you do the next gig that's similar to that, right?
Well, yeah, you're experimenting, and one thing you do is you learn how to experiment with the audience. You play with them.
Yeah.
You watch them, and if they're all bored, if they're all talking to one another, and saying, "Hi, how are you doing?" They're all having a good time talking to each other. Then you got to do something to make them stop it because you want them to watch you.
What are some things you guys would do? What are some tricks?
Yeah. Well, we'd turn on the feedback.
Yeah.
And that would get them. That would be like shocked deer, in a headlight. They'd all be shocked, and they'd stop and look at you, and then you'd smile at them and break up their conversation so that they basically would look at each other with puzzled looks on their face. And what are they doing?
It's interesting with feedback and how it captures an audience's attention is like kind of crazy. You know what I mean? Because like it's almost the effort of letting go musically with an electronic instrument, like an electric guitar, or turning the mic the wrong way. No matter what, that's like, huh? Everyone's like, what? Or like alarmed. And like, it's a...
Yeah. Well, last night I went to a thing called Debauch, Virginia City, which is here in Nevada. And it's a old ghost town. Well, it's not a ghost town anymore. But anyway, the Piper's Opera House, and they had a event there. And the band's playing that. Everybody uses feedback now.
Well, yeah, like because you guys prove it works. Was it who was playing? Who'd you go see?
We saw Subsonics, Billy Childish.
Okay.
And somebody else. I forget their name. But there were 3 different groups playing, and my wife and I were there. We were we were invited to come sell books, so we had a little booth where we sold books.
Because I guess it kind of jumps into another question I had with with just the kind of the discipline of the Army and music. After everything, you go to school for writing. Did that discipline carry over? Was writing did you find it had that same kind of excitement expression-wise as music did?
Yes, I did. And my teacher, Gelnhausen, was a very excellent teacher. And he told me, he said, when I first applied to go to his classes, he told me, he says, I don't take anybody if you're going to go to my class, you have to write. We don't talk about writing. You have to write. And he says, I don't care if I don't care about your grammar or anything like that. I just want you to write. And he thought he got rid of me by telling me, well, if you're going to show up to my class, the first class you got to show up, you got to bring 120 pages.
Wow.
And then after that, you got to do 60 pages a week. And I did it for 5 years.
And is it free form? Is it just just write?
Just writing. And
okay.
The writing, you learn from the writing what your form is going to be just from doing that.
Through doing this relentless, just kind of being at it, you see
doing it.
Okay. When did you start to notice your form, and what did that look like?
Well, it kicked in pretty quickly, and Gelnhausen, I've got about 7 books I haven't published yet, and I've still got to figure out what to do with them. But I used the first person sometimes, and then the third person, first person, third person, that sort of thing.
Like switching between the two?
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically, you kind of get a rhythm going.
Mm-hmm. It's I've been diving into trying to do descriptive writing to kind of aid in songwriting and just thinking that way. And forever I've always wanted to be good at it, and I try just to write a bit every day, but that's really interesting to hear that's the process, and finding that out of the madness. And it makes so much sense compared to music. You learn.
Well, it's like Gil said, he says, don't worry about the grammar, because when people talk, people don't use correct grammar. And he says, if you just talk in a natural voice, you'll find out what your voice is after a while. Really
well said. I'm gonna try to crank out 60 pages. That's hard, man. Wow. So that's but that's really relative to your whole musical journey, finding this this form and striving for freedom.
Well, it's music is a language, and it's an art, I guess. You can think of all the heavy synonyms you might want to use with it, or the descriptions. But it's an important thing, I think animals sing, people sing, everybody does.
So, kind of jumping back, so the Torquays are playing, you guys are doing hour-long sets, and you're tricking the audience to get their attention, and the feedback thing is really kicking. There's one point where, is it Dave leaves his banjo, or leaves his guitar? It would have been a guitar at the time, and then
yeah, Gary left his guitar. We were practicing in the afternoon, and he had to go to the bathroom, and he left it. We had it turned up kind of loud, and he set it against the amplifier, went to the bathroom. While he was gone, it started humming, and then it just grew into a roar, And Roger and I were bored, and we just started playing some beat to it. And Gary come back, he says, oh, God, I got to do something. And he started hammering something out on it. and it was a beginning.
That was discovering the fire. And then that was discovering the fire.
Yeah, just discovering the fire, right?
It's great but that reflects so much in what you just said about writing, like just doing the stuff and then you find it. And so
it's there. It's everybody's got a voice, and people who spend time writing, I think it's a method that I don't know if anybody uses it in college classes or not, but I know it worked for me.
Was this through college, or this was like his own class, to jump back to your writing teacher?
He was a writer who did movies, wrote for movies, and he's known as Gilbert Alexander, Gilbert Alexander, I think. I forgot his name now. I just know him as Gil Ralston, and he became like my second father. And he's dead now, but he told, he just told the class. I was one that gave him 60 pages a week, and from that I learned, what he was talking about. There's no talking, right? We're not going to sit here in the class and talk about writing. We're going to write.
Well, I think that's a big part of it. I think a lot of people get in their heads with, like, am I writing something good? And even with music, am I writing a song that's good? Where it almost becomes just a numbers game for a song, right? You just keep writing, and eventually you'll have one that clicks, and then two, and then you have a set, and like it grows from that.
Yeah, you find little clicks that click in your style, and they work for you.
So when you moved back to America from this whole adventure, which I know, sorry, I'm skipping around a lot, but how long after that did you start taking these writing classes, and did that kind of help move back home?
Well, I went to Minneapolis. I come to Nevada, and then I went from Nevada to Minneapolis to go to school to study electronic computing, electronics, and broadcasting. And while I was there, I met a saxophone player who played just like Coltrane. And so I played trumpet with him, and then we formed a team, and then we worked in a group called Minnesota, Minsoda, Minnesota, and we recorded in Nashville and Chicago, RCA, Chicago, Capitol Records in Nashville. And I did that for 3 or 4 years. And then that band broke up. I came home, not intending to stay, but while I was here, I heard about this writer who had classes for writing, and I followed him around. I caught him in a store, and told him I had a manuscript or something, and he kept ignoring me. But finally, after about third time I met him someplace, he says, "Okay, you come on a Wednesday night at 7:00. I came 5 minutes to 7. Knocks on his door and he says, "It's not 7. Come back at 7."
The punctuality, you know what I mean? Like, was Minnesota, was that Copperhead at first, right?
Yeah, that was Copperhead.
So, like, I guess from going from the Monks to Minnesota, like, what were some of the lessons that kind of carried over band-wise that worked right away with this new group?
Well, we were a band, or a cover band, and Rick and I were playing, and I encouraged every one to write music. Let's do our own stuff. Let's not do somebody else's stuff. And we went off and did improvisation more in a jazz type form, which was, we went from being spare minimalists and monks to over elaborate guys, playing very intricate things in Minnesota.
It's like a huge step from one to the next. Was there enough time in between that it had to be refreshing to kind of step in a different mindset and be like, okay, instead of nothing here, we're going to I'm going to impose some changes.
Well, it was my passion for 3 years with them. Bob Johnson, who was, he produced everyone from Elvis Presley to Simon Garfunkel, you name them. He wanted us to be a studio band in Nashville, but we were too wild. We couldn't do that. We wanted to do our own thing, or we weren't going to do it at all.
Yeah, the studio band, you guys got to hold back a lot. And
yeah, I'd say. You mean we go to work carrying a brown paper bag with a sandwich in it?
Read these charts, and usually it's kind of going back to being in between minimal and not minimal at the same time. There's lusciousness to tracks like that, but it's also tone it back,
Yeah. Oh, well, it's we were too wild. We were uncontrollable.
Is that a byproduct in what is mock show?
Mock show is German for make show. And, like last night, I said to my wife, look, he's making show. He's laying on the floor playing his guitar, that kind of stuff.
So did that excitement and we can't be studio bound, is that from years of doing 6-hour, 8-hour long sets of constantly having to be on, and to some degree, you know what I mean? To constantly be fighting the audience for a smidge of attention so they stick around, and the club owner's here's your, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, the studio band, they tell you what to do. You in a way, you don't do what you're doing. You're doing what, as an example, at that time, Mick Jagger was going to do a solo album. They were talking about it, and we would have to do what he wanted to do. Says, I don't want to be I don't want to play Mick Jagger songs. But of course, it was kind of naive of us. We were being very naive. Because if I would have done what they told me to do, what they wanted me to do, I probably would have made a lot more money.
Well, it's is the money worth the self-expression? But it's nice. It's nice to be able to eat, for sure.
Yeah, well, it's good to be able to eat.
That's a definite. So I guess jump back again in the midst of discovering this fire of feedback and trying to hone that and make that into your guys' collaborative style of music to what became the Uber beat, what became the Monks. What did that kind of process look like? Was it just laying down a beat and jamming and having everyone adds their stuff to this beat, and then Gary would write lyrics over it?
Yeah. Well, no, we would all write lyrics, and then we would put them all together, and then tear them all apart, just leaving a skeleton to see what kind of message it had. And so, in a sense, everybody's writing lyrics, but all together, it's too much lyrics. But then you kind of, I think this is talking about how to do now. Okay, so then, okay, get rid of all these excess words. Just this. That would be it.
Okay. So was it like a kind of like, okay, everyone just free write ideas that fit with this, and then we pull them apart, or was there kind of like a topic, like this is like a how to do now, like, or monk time, like what's that mean, and then tearing into each bit?
Yeah, well, Monk Time was our first song that we wrote, and it had a lot more words in it. And where Gary talks about everybody being monks, and but we thought, well, we're monks. Why can't everybody be monks? And then we argue. Well, I don't know. What do you say? Everybody's going to be monks? You're kidding. Well, yeah, you can be a monk. I can be a monk. What about girls? Well, they can be a monk too if they want.
Well, it opens up then it becomes part. You're in it now. Like,
yeah,
it's expertly written. When did was it the simplicity, like the discovering the fire? Was it clear that the highlight was minimalism, or was this kind of a conversation due to everything else that was going around, that minimalism kind of became the goal, or the kind of philosophical stretch to that?
Well, I think the minimalism was part of it. Our managers talked us into being more simple, and by following their advice, just to keep it simple, you guys. Then there was Steve Reich. A lot of minimalist composers were out, and it seemed like something that might be acceptable.
Well, I guess that gives the branching concept. Did and I guess as far as like monk time, the question I had on that was like, there's the rules of being a monk that I think it was Carl and those guys wrote up for you.
Oh, the list of things?
Yeah. Was that kind of inspired after or before like some of the monk songs existed?
Well, that was inspired afterwards when we started performing as the monks. Then the managers had this great idea. It says, "Okay, you guys, you gotta give them a message." And so everybody's, if you're a Beatle, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this. If you're the monks, you got to be exactly the opposite. And so we, in a sense, we became like the Beatles. We became the anti-Beatles. It was like we were the Antichrist.
But that's also that kind of minimalist thing. It's really interesting. They really like kind of honed in on that. And watching some of like Carl's not Coca-Cola, whatever that soda, those ads he had, this dude was pretty wild, man.
Yeah.
So for them to kind of like jump in and like see you guys, like they found you guys through the clubs, right?
Yeah, they saw us playing in Stuttgart, where we were experimenting with the audience a lot. And we'd be bored. And one night, these two guys were in there. They were dressed in suits and stuff, and we thought, something weird about them. I don't know what they're doing here. But afterwards, they come up to the stage and told us they wanted to have a meeting with us. And says we went to their place, and they showed us their advertisements. One of them did a minimalist advertisement for Volkswagen, that kind of stuff. Says we can make you guys, stars. Says, yeah, okay, we'll do it.
Yeah, but I guess was that type of advertising really popular in German culture? Like, were you seeing that everywhere?
No, not really. But, do you remember an advertisement about a Volkswagen Beetle out in the middle of just nowhere, just by itself?
Got a point.
Well, that's the kind of stuff they did,
Yeah.
and it was them that did it,
Because being a whole different culture, jumping into a whole nother world. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that the monks really, you can sort of say it's two cultures. It's American and German in a way, There's something about it that it feels that is not totally American and not totally German,
What do you think is the, if you had to like kind of pick the what is, would like the American side of it be like the music, and like the minimal be the German side of it, or like what do you think those kind of divides
Well,
are?
I think that the minimalist part would be a little bit more German than American. But then the rock and roll, that's American.
Very much so. One question I had was with the recording process of the first record of Black Monk Time. Does like there was something that's in the book that said like you had to ramp because you guys were so loud, you couldn't be in the same spot at the same time, but you couldn't be too far away to not cue each other with the kind of
well, that's because we had one of the things we worked for was tension in our music, and by tension you'd stretch things out, not in 8 bars or 4 bars, but maybe 17 or 15 or something, some odd thing, and you have to count them. And actually, the music sounds simple, but it's very difficult to play because you're constantly counting. And it's what was the question again?
Well, on a side note, that's very kind of Brubeckian, like to add musical tension in that sense. That's a very specific place to build tension, because you can build tension with sharp, dissonant harmonies, and you can build up in dynamics. But to build tension with form in a minimalistic, big scale idea, that's a really like tense thing. Harping on a chorus for like a couple bars way too long, compared to like a standard whatever everyone's used to hearing pop tune, really gets that kind of head turner, that where's this, that's the feedback of structure. Was that another thing you guys were experimenting with as the Torquays playing out, was form like that?
Well, yeah, we didn't practice the minimalist form or the tension so much, but we realized by watching the audiences and all that stuff that one thing that we needed to get their attention was we had to put tension into the song, because you'd see them there waiting for, they expect, okay, you play 8 bars, they expect it to change, and it doesn't change. They sit there and they watch, and all of a sudden it changes, and you see their heads, their eyes blink or something, So you watch what's going on with them, and that's what our managers picked up on.
And to go back, my question was, because you guys had this problem in the studio of having to cue each other for these strange.
Right.
How did they fix that? Like.
Well, they put us. The studio was like a big auditorium, and they put us in various corners, but facing each other, so we could see each other over a long distance, And then they had to get the resonance to work right. They ran a big 30-foot round piece of tape over a doorknob into the recorder for a very long sort of echo. Otherwise it'd be all mash.
Yeah, that part's fascinating to me. Like the analog, like tape working? Like who knows not to open that door? Like, how does that, like, how's the doorknob the right amount of time for the echo compared to like the cabinet in the middle or whatever? Like,
well, the thing was, everybody was happy. The managers got to experiment. We got to experiment, and the producer Jimmy Bovine from Polydor Records, he got to experiment. Everybody was experimenting.
That's another interesting thing too, is like when everyone gets to kind of break form and like have fun a little bit and try something new and something that shouldn't work or might not work, and find out there's such like a little magic within that. And that's so cool that everyone on that production of that record got to do that.
Well, yeah, and the thing is I think the most important thing is, at least it's my opinion, I don't know if it's everybody else's, but I feel like if you hear the Monks, you know it's the Monks because nobody else sounds like them.
That is very, very true. And just musically, instrumentally, production-wise, it's such a unique and powerful sound. To kind of jump into, so down the line you guys are playing, there's one show I wanted to ask about. I'm sure, and you get a lot of questions about it, but you guys played with Hendrix?
Yeah, we played with Hendrix in Kiel, Germany.
Was he a cool dude? Did you get to interact or pick his brain at all? What was that like?
Well, I felt I watched him. We have some pictures of him, but somebody took them. They disappeared on us. But I'd sure like to find those photos, whatever happened to him. But he was a quiet dude. He didn't talk much, and he sat out in the audience and watched us play. And he was just like us. People were afraid of us. People wouldn't talk to us because of our appearance. You know what I mean? Like, where they were afraid we're I don't know, maybe it's their upbringing or something, but kids wouldn't look at us in the eye, you know. And Jimi Hendrix was sitting out in the audience, and I was thinking the same thing, because he sat out there, and everybody kind of stood clear of him.
So there almost like a kind of shared sense of like lone adventuring on this like minimalist and free expression.
The music was totally different, and I was impressed by him. I thought, man, this guy is a great guitar player.
But was that on a side kind of, was it normal for other acts to come out and watch the other acts, or was that weird? Like, because I know some bands, like when we play with them, they hide in the back and they wait till they're done. Like, oh yeah, you guys sounded good from the green room.
It was different. It was different. He come out and watched us, and he was kind of curious about our music. Where did it come from? And you know, we didn't have any answers for him. We say, oh, I don't know. It just, you know. But he one of the things was he was interested in Gary's wah-wah pedal. He asked Gary what that was, and Gary told him. And he was interested in that. And he just sat out there and watched us, and that was unusual.
That became a big staple for him, too, the wah-wah pedal.
Yeah, it was. After all of a sudden he was using it, you know, and I hadn't heard him before, but that was before he really took off, you know.
Was he doing the same type of circuit? Well, I mean, this had to be like, this wasn't like hours of show. This was like 45-minute set or something, yeah?
Yeah, it'd be a 45-minute set. Those were...
That's like, after years of this and years of playing, did you kind of eventually find answers for those questions that he had at that time?
Did we find the answers to what questions?
Oh, well, you said Jimi Hendrix asked you guys some questions about where your music came from, and you didn't have answers then. But,
David and Jimmy were from the same town, Renton, Washington. And in fact, when David died, he was buried 70 feet away from Jimi Hendrix's tomb.
Yeah.
They're both within eyesight of each other.
That's fascinating. So when the managers pitched the banjo, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you guys have faith in the banjo working at first? Because the banjo's hard to mic up. Like, I've been trying to do one for my banjo just to get it to run through a PA clean.
Well, he took the head off of it and put a microphone in it.
Straight under it?
Oh no, David.
Like in the body.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And was it okay? Was it an easy sell afterwards? Because it really is rhythmically.
Yeah, it's very sharp, very very clunky, very sharp hit. It's like being hit.
Yeah. And I guess a couple more questions. And Eddie, I really appreciate your time and taking time out of your day to do this. When you guys got back together and did some of these reunion shows, and the album gets released in America, and it's a total opposite of this uphill battle, and I feel like anyone who does anything that after you study the structure for so long and you learn that all you have to do is step away from it and just break all these rules you make, and you make this new thing, that new thing takes forever to see that process. It's almost a reflection of the process of that creation. And was it when you guys got back together to do some of these shows, aside from it being probably mind blowing, did you guys fall right into it?
No, it was we had to relearn it. It was, and being older, not necessarily wiser, just being older, we had to contend with each other's egos. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
all of a sudden, everybody had egos. Because we'd been away from each other so long, we weren't. It took a little while for us to get tight again.
And then, with the reactions of playing these reunion shows.
Well, the reactions were good. I was just talking to a guy last night who saw us play in Vegas.
Yeah.
And he said it was the greatest show he ever saw. And I said, God, I always thought that show was one of the worst ones we ever played.
It's interesting as a performer, you may be having an awful day and everything the monitor doesn't work. You can't tell if you're anywhere near pitch or whatever it may be. And you're just waiting for the night to be over. And then it's you can't define someone's experience, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The thing is people have heard about the Monks. I know that because all of a sudden book sales have taken off. They're going through the roof, and I'm getting to the point where I'm going to have to find a big distributor or something because I can't handle it anymore.
That's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you make music that's solely, or anything, if you make anything that's solely just expression and a pure expression of one, not trying to sell anything, just trying to do you and trying to find what you have to say, that's the most inspiring thing because that shows other people they can do it.
Yeah, anybody can do it. They just got to, and everybody will do it differently if they're with different people. It's, in our sense, it was a combination, chemistry elements or DNA between five guys,
Well, and it's just kind of that doing it.
Yeah.
And breaking through that perseverance will eventually equal success if you don't stop or if you wait a while. I don't know.
Or, yeah, well, the thing is, you have to have somebody guide you in a way to say, well, when you're experimenting and you're young, you'll be a little naive every once in a while. You'll put bad words in something or something like that, and somebody will warn you, say, watch out for that.
As the monks, what was like some of the guiding principles that kind of really helped out?
I don't know. The guiding principles was just don't smile. They tell us not to smile, but we would smile all the time.
I love that there's that video of you guys on that live performance, and Gary's just smiling, winking at the audience. Like, you guys were having fun, and it sounds so good. That bass tone you got, it's like, I don't know how you, that it's distorted, but it sounds so clear and punchy and not, pumped up. It's incredible. Was that just cranking it?
No, it comes from worn-out bass speakers.
Oh, okay.
Well, I overstressed them. Yeah. They were overstressed, and they were just perfect for that kind of thing. I couldn't buy anything that would sound like that. Speakers are another interesting phenomena. How that works. Like, there's that glowing ripe point in the middle of the speaker's life, or any with those tube electronics or those more analog electronics that you can really run like that. There's an interesting kind of, I don't know, electronic ripeness that really makes it stick out in certain points compared to some of the digital tech now. But my last question being, you said you have 7 books in the works or written and just waiting to figure out, are these all I've got 8 books out now. I've got Cowboy Like Me, which is short stories based upon my youth. And I got 2 more volumes of them. And it's fiction. All the names have been changed to protect the guilty. And then I got Beltrami's River, which is about the discovery of the Mississippi, which I went up and followed the trail of this old explorer, Beltrami. And then I have Monk Time, and then I have the Monk Time 2. I have Passing Through Minnesota. And then I got a new one that's coming out shortly. It's called, what the heck is it called? Oh, God. I can't think of what it's called. Well, that's the writing, the nonstop doing. Do you still do 60 pages a day or a week? Not right now because I've been interrupted by selling books. That's incredible, though. That's awesome. I don't like it. I'd rather write. I don't want to sell books. Well, and I think that speaks very highly of you, and very highly of what you do. It's the process of it. It's the doing of it. And the marketing and sales and the capital end of it is a byproduct of it. And that's the beauty of art and creation. And I think to hear you say that is very inspiring. Well, thank you. Well, thank you, Eddie. I really appreciate your time, your music, and your writing. And I'm very excited to hear that you need to figure out more because you're selling more books, man. That's incredible. Well, Davey, I thank you for calling and enjoyed my conversation with you. And hope everything goes well for you. All right. Well, thank you, man.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.